Business news with Catherine Nicholson, who's joined us on set. Hi, Catherine.
Morning.
Let's start with the latest on the markets.
OK, we'll start right here in Europe, where the stock market trading opened just a couple of minutes ago, and it's looking fairly positive across the board. We can see that one big gainer to highlight here in France on the CAC 40 is Areva, which has gained 3%. This is on the back of rumours that it is going to sign a big deal over in Turkey, but as you can see across the board there, plenty of green to start the day. Something else to mention in Europe, later on this morning, the European Central Bank is holding its monthly interest rate meeting. Now, they are expected to keep the rate flat at its current level, but investors will be looking for signs that there's going to be a move, there will be a cut in the short to medium term.
All right, let's move to Cyprus now. The bailout deal yesterday was agreed on, the terms of the bailout deal. So now the blame game is beginning to try and point blame for who's to blame for the country getting into this financial mess.
Yeah, really like drilling down into the root causes of it, because of course they're dealing with the current situation, trying to get that bailout deal and everything like you say. But yeah, the Supreme Court judges launching an inquiry into how they got to the brink of bankruptcy, looking all the way back to 2006. The president, Nikos Anastasiadis, has said he wants everyone who could possibly be implicated to be investigated, and this actually includes himself and members of his own family, their businesses. There have been allegations that they were involved, that they had some prior warning. So all this is going to be investigated. Josh Vardy's been looking a little bit closer.
A crippled Eurozone economy looking forward to at least 2 years of recession. A government investigation is now due to be launched by Cyprus to reveal to the public how almost a decade of financial excess has driven the country's banking sector to its knees. Michael Saris, who stepped down as finance minister after 5 weeks in the job, said he expects the investigation to be thorough.
I think the public is entitled to have a full picture of what went wrong, what could have been done.
Saris says he stood down from government because he would be under too much scrutiny from the investigation. He was the former head of Lehman Bank, which has now been wound down under a mountain of debt. Even Cyprus's newly elected president says he will not be immune.
As these days even I am under judgment, I ask you to make it a priority to investigate any accusations against me directly or indirectly. And do not limit yourself to just my relatives, but widen your search to the legal office where I was a partner.
While the president and his family are due to be scrutinized, it's thought the investigation will focus more on the mistakes made by previous administrations. 3 judges will assess whether regulations were followed and supervised, the soundness of previous fiscal policy, and the decisions made by banks to take on large quantities of Greek bonds at a time when others were selling them.
Catherine, there have been more accusations of financial wrongdoing. In New York, a self-confessed rogue trader has handed himself in.
Yeah, he handed himself into the FBI, no less. It sounds a bit like a TV series or a movie, but it is real life. But there are movie-style big amounts of money involved as well. This is a former Goldman Sachs trader, Matthew Marshall Taylor, handed himself in and pleaded guilty to what's known as a wire fraud. This is an illegal trade he made with Goldman Sachs money in 2007, worth around 6.4 billion euros. It resulted in a 91 million euro loss for Goldman Sachs. He was actually fired at the time, but this is now going into court. So he's actually admitted he knew what he was doing was wrong, but he wanted to boost his reputation and try and earn one of those big bankers' bonuses that we're always talking about.
Do we have any idea why he handed himself in, or we don't know?
I don't have the details on that, but I think it's probably going to come out. Yeah.
All right, there's a big payout due later as the fallout continues from the 2008 financial crash.
Yeah, this is to do with Lehman Brothers, which was the biggest bankruptcy in US history, in fact. And they are going to be making a payout later of around $14 billion. Basically, they came out of bankruptcy protection about a year ago, and they have lots of legal settlements to make with their creditors from that bankruptcy, which sparked the global financial crisis.
And the Egyptian economy, Cairo, is getting into the final details of a major loan from the IMF.
Yes. Now, this is very important for Egypt, and an Egyptian minister has said that there will be a deal with the IMF within 2 weeks. They want to get $4.8 billion worth of loan from the IMF to try and boost their economy. Stephen Carroll has more details for you.
Their first day back in Egypt, and the IMF had already drawn protesters onto the streets. The fund's inspectors are in Cairo meeting finance ministry and central bank officials to assess the state of the Egyptian economy. The protesters are fearful of the strict conditions an IMF loan would bring. Egypt has been in talks with the global lender for almost 2 years. Cairo needs to convince the fund it's serious about unpopular reforms to cut its budget deficit of over 12%. Since the fall of former President Mubarak, Egypt's tourism revenues have plummeted, as has the value of the Egyptian pound. The financial crunch has forced the government to cut back on wheat and fuel imports, leading to widespread shortages and power cuts. Just before the IMF team arrived, the government slashed a subsidy on gas cylinders, which sent their price soaring by 60%, an attempt to show it's serious about sorting out its finances.
Had been discussing previously a figure of 4.8 billion, as you said. As to what the amount will be now will be discussed and determined in light of the financing needs that Egypt has.
An eventual rescue package for Egypt is also likely to include loans from friendly Arab states like Qatar, but the IMF deal is seen as key to unlocking that finance. The country is hoping to have a deal in place by the IMF spring meetings later this month.
And back here in Europe, French lawmakers are currently discussing important reforms to labour law. Catherine, what are the ideas that are being discussed?
Well, they're talking about how to deal with these crisis periods that we are still living through here in Europe. For example, we know that car sales have fallen greatly in Europe, which means that there's knock-on effects not just for car factories, but for example, the tyre factories and the other bits and pieces that go into the chain. So when they don't have a lot of orders in, what do you do with the workers? Do you just sack them all? Do you get rid of them? Obviously, no one wants that. So they're talking about things where they can make employment more flexible. This is an example from Michelin, which makes tyres. When activity drops, they could have people not working for up to 15 days, but they would still get paid their normal wage. However, when activity picks back up, to try and pay that back into the system, they could have 11 days extra of work that they don't get paid for. So some of the sort of actually quite revolutionary ideas that they're coming up with for France, where things are quite stiff, really, in terms of employment law.
All right. Catherine Nicholson with the Business News. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching France 24. Stay tuned. Stuart Norville is up next. Bye-bye.